The Omega dozed off at the mating ceremony and awoke enclosed in the Alpha King's arms. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main characters. Lena stood nervously in the middle of the ceremonial hall, the grand chamber of the royal palace echoing with soft murmurs from the gathered crowd. Tonight was the night of her mating ceremony, a tradition as old as the kingdom itself. An Omega like her, with all her insecurities and uncertainties, would be bound by the rituals that governed her fate. As she tried to steady her breath, her thoughts were a whirlwind. She had always known this moment would come, but now that it was here, the weight of it felt unbearable. The pressure to be perfect, the expectations surrounding the ceremony, the eyes of the entire kingdom upon her. Lena could barely keep her composure. She had always known her place as an Omega, subservient and loyal, but tonight, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. The grand doors opened, and all eyes turned as the Alpha King made his entrance. David, the ruler of their realm, a figure of strength and untold power, walked in with all the grace and majesty of someone accustomed to command. His presence commanded the room. No one dared to speak, no one dared to move. He was the Alpha King, after all. As Lena's eyes met his, her breath caught in her throat. There was something in his gaze, a mix of authority and something else she couldn't quite name. He walked toward her, his every step deliberate, his eyes never leaving hers. Lena's heart raced, her palms growing clammy as she tried to stay still, to hide her inner turmoil. David stopped in front of her, towering over her with an intensity that made her feel small, fragile even. His piercing gaze softened for just a moment, and then, to her surprise, he gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Are you all right, Lena?" he asked, his voice deep and commanding, yet surprisingly warm. Before she could answer, the ceremony began. But as the chants echoed through the hall, Lena's exhaustion caught up with her. The stress of the moment, the overwhelming emotions, and the endless expectations took their toll. Without meaning to, her eyelids grew heavy, and before she knew it, Lena had dozed off, her head falling forward as sleep took her. The ceremony continued around her, but in the quiet, unnoticed by the others, Lena remained unaware of the world around her. She was completely unaware that she had just drifted into a moment of vulnerability, a moment that would alter everything. When she finally stirred, it was the warmth of someone's arms that welcomed her back to consciousness. Slowly, Lena opened her eyes, blinking as she tried to make sense of her surroundings. And then she realized, she was not standing in the center of the hall anymore. She was in the strong embrace of Alpha King David, his arms securely around her, holding her close. Her heart raced again, but this time, it wasn't from fear. She was safe. She felt safe. But confusion followed. What had happened? How had she ended up in his arms? What did it mean? She lifted her gaze to meet his, and for the first time since meeting him, she saw something different in his eyes, something warmer, gentler. Was it care? Lena couldn't be sure, but she knew one thing. This was not how she had imagined her mating ceremony would go. And the night was only just beginning. In the silence of the grand hall, Lena's mind was still spinning. The warm embrace of Alpha King David surrounded her, and for a moment, she forgot about the world around her. Her senses were flooded with his presence, his strong arms holding her, his scent, familiar yet intoxicating, filling her senses. She blinked, trying to make sense of everything. She was in his arms, but how had she gotten here? The ceremony had been a blur, and now, the only thing that mattered was the powerful, comforting grip that held her. David's arms were firm, yet there was an undeniable gentleness in the way he held her. Lena's heart raced, but it wasn't from fear this time. It was from something else entirely, something unfamiliar. She wanted to pull away, to regain control, but her body wouldn't. Listen, the Alpha King seemed to sense her hesitation. He didn't move or speak right away, allowing her the time she needed to adjust. Slowly, she gathered the strength to look up at him. His gaze met hers, soft but intense, and she could see the concern in his eyes, a rare vulnerability that he rarely showed. "Are you feeling better now?" he asked, his voice deep but reassuring, as though he was genuinely concerned for her well-being. Lena nodded, her throat tight with emotions she couldn't fully express. I'm sorry," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to fall asleep during the ceremony." David's expression softened even further, and he gently lifted one of his hands, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "There's no need to apologize," he replied quietly. "You've been under a great deal of stress, Lena. It's understandable." Lena felt a strange warmth spreading through her chest at his words. She had expected judgment or perhaps even disappointment, but there was none. His calmness was soothing, and for the first time that night, she felt a sense of relief. "But the ceremony," she began, her voice shaky. "I was supposed to." "The ceremony is not over," David interrupted gently, his voice firm but not unkind. "You don't need to worry. We will proceed when you are ready." Lena wasn't sure what to make of his words. Everything about the ceremony felt like a blur, but there was one thing she was certain of. This was not the way she had imagined it would unfold. Are you sure?" she asked hesitantly, still unsure whether she was ready to continue. David smiled softly, a small but reassuring gesture. "You don't have to rush. This is about you, Lena, and only you. If you need more time, we will wait." His words were like a balm to her frazzled nerves, and Lena took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The weight of the moment felt less heavy now, and she found herself able to think more clearly. She was in the arms of the Alpha King, yes, but there was something else, something deeper in the way he treated her, a kindness that was unexpected, yet undeniable. For the first time, she realized that maybe this wasn't a simple duty for him. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to this connection than tradition. Lena slowly sat up, distancing herself just enough to look at him fully. David didn't pull away, instead allowing her the space to collect herself. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice trembling with gratitude and something else, something she hadn't quite identified yet. "I didn't expect." She trailed off, unsure how to finish the sentence. David gave her a small nod, his gaze unwavering. "You didn't expect what?" he asked, his voice gentle, yet carrying the weight of a deeper question. Lena hesitated, wondering whether it was wise to speak her thoughts out loud, but something in his eyes encouraged her to be honest. "I didn't expect you to be so understanding," she confessed. "I thought you would be disappointed in me." David's eyes softened even further, and he shook his head. "Lena, I would never be disappointed in you," he said, his voice steady and sincere. "I understand more than you think." His words sent a shiver through her, and for a brief moment, she found herself lost in the depths of his gaze. The connection between them was undeniable, and Lena couldn't help but wonder what this night would truly bring. The mating ceremony had begun with such tension, but now, it seemed like something else was unfolding, something that neither of them had anticipated. Lena's heart pounded in her chest, but this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from the strange pull between them, a pull she couldn't explain, but that she was beginning to accept. It took a moment for Lena to steady herself. The softness of the Alpha King's gaze lingered in her mind, calming her more than she would have ever expected. His words, his kindness, were a stark contrast to the power and authority she had always known him to wield. Lena had always imagined him as distant, a ruler who would never truly understand her, an Omega, but now, here he was, standing before her with an open, patient heart. The distance between them had shrunk, yet the world around them still felt so vast. She was still in his arms, but it no longer felt as overwhelming as before. Slowly, Lena shifted, pulling away just enough to gather her thoughts. She noticed how carefully David observed her, his expression unwavering, as if waiting for her to decide what came next. She could feel her heart thumping loudly in her chest, but she tried to steady it. There was something undeniably calming in his presence, something that made her feel safer than she had ever felt before. Lena began, her voice trembling slightly as she struggled to find the right words. "I didn't expect this. I thought the ceremony would be like all the others, just a formality, something I had to get through. But it's different." David's eyes softened, and he stepped back just slightly, giving her the space she needed. "This is your moment, Lena," he said quietly, his voice calm but firm. You don't have to go through it just to follow tradition. If this is what you want, we'll make it our own." His words hung in the air, the sincerity behind them clear. Lena took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words settle over her. She had always seen her life as a series of expectations, first as a daughter, then as an Omega, and now, in this moment, as part of the ceremony. But David's words offered a different perspective, one where she had the freedom to make her own choices. "I don't know what I want," she admitted quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just so overwhelmed. I never thought this moment would feel so." She paused, trying to find the right word. "Personal." David nodded, understanding flickering in his eyes. "It should feel personal. This is a bond, not just a duty." His words made Lena's heart race again. The bond he was referring to wasn't just the ceremonial one she had always known. It was deeper, something more significant than what she had been prepared for. Lena looked up at him, her mind racing with the possibilities. Could she trust him? Could she trust this strange connection that was forming between them? She wasn't sure, but something in her gut told her that this was just the beginning. For the first time in her life, Lena didn't feel entirely lost. There was a sense of clarity, a sense of purpose that she hadn't expected to find here, in the arms of the Alpha King. She took another deep breath, steadying herself. I want to understand," she said, her voice stronger now. "I want to understand what this really means. What this connection means." David didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped back further, allowing her to regain her balance. "You will," he said simply. "But in your own time, Lena. No rush." The room was silent, save for the soft hum of distant voices outside the ceremonial hall. The weight of the moment still hung between them, but it no longer felt like a burden. Instead, it felt like the beginning of something new, something neither of them could fully understand yet, but both were willing to explore. Lena felt her body relax, the tension in her shoulders melting away. She was no longer just an Omega bound by ceremony. She was a woman, standing before the Alpha King, ready to discover what the future held for her, whatever it might be. David didn't look away, his gaze steady and unwavering as he watched her. In that moment, Lena realized that she wasn't alone in this. No matter what came next, she would have a choice, and that realization made all the difference. It was clear to Lena that the night had taken a turn she hadn't anticipated. With every passing second, the tension she had felt earlier was slipping away, replaced by something else, something she couldn't quite place, but that felt real and undeniable. The soft, comforting presence of Alpha King David had calmed her, and for the first time that night, Lena began to feel a sense of control she had never experienced before. She stood there, facing him, her heart still pounding but no longer in fear. Instead, it was the stirrings of something else, something warmer. "So what happens now?" Lena asked, her voice steady but still laced with uncertainty. David met her gaze, his expression serious, but there was a glimmer of warmth in his eyes that made her feel seen. "Now, we do this at your pace," he replied, his tone reassuring. "There's no rush, Lena. This is your moment. You decide what happens next." His words were like a balm to her soul. For the first time in a long while, Lena felt like she had the power to shape her own destiny. She wasn't bound by duty or tradition. She wasn't just a piece in a ceremony. She was a person, and David was treating her as such. The realization was overwhelming, but in the best way possible. Lena took a step back, carefully considering his words. She had spent her whole life being told what to do, being guided by the expectations of others. But now, standing in front of the Alpha King, she was given a choice to define what came next. She breathed deeply, looking up at him, and for the first time, she allowed herself to fully acknowledge the depth of the connection between them. There was something magnetic about him, something she couldn't ignore. But at the same time, she couldn't rush into anything either. "I think I need some time," she said softly, the words feeling like a weight lifted from her shoulders. "I need to understand this, everything. I can't just dive into something without knowing what it really means." David nodded, his expression thoughtful, and his eyes never wavered from hers. "Of course. Take all the time you need," he said, his voice steady. "I'm here, Lena. We'll do this in your own way." She was grateful for his patience, grateful for the space he was giving her. It was a kindness she had never expected, especially from someone of his status. The Alpha King was not a man known for being overly patient, yet here he was, offering her the freedom to decide for herself. Lena felt a wave of relief wash over her, a sense of calm she hadn't known she was missing. She knew this wasn't going to be easy. The road ahead was still unclear, and there would be challenges. But with David's support, it didn't feel as daunting as it had before. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet but sincere. "I don't think I've ever been given a choice like this before. It's a lot to take in." David smiled, the warmth in his expression never fading. "You deserve it," he said simply. "You deserve the chance to decide what happens to you, Lena." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The room was still, but the air between them was charged with something neither of them could ignore. There was a quiet understanding that passed between them, a silent agreement that whatever happened next, they would face it together. Lena looked up at him again, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in her life, she felt like she had a say in it. She wasn't alone in this, not anymore. And for the first time, that thought didn't scare her, it filled her with hope. It had been hours since Lena had spoken to David, but the weight of their conversation lingered in the air like an unspoken promise. She had gone back to her quarters after the ceremony, her mind swirling with everything that had happened. The night, which had started with such tension, had transformed into something completely different. A sense of calm had settled over her, and though she was still processing everything, she knew one thing for sure: David had changed everything. He had given her the space to think, to breathe, and to decide for herself. She hadn't expected this kind of compassion from someone of his stature. The Alpha King was a man of power and strength, and in the past, Lena had only ever seen him as someone untouchable, someone who ruled with authority, not empathy. But tonight, he had shown her a side of him that was gentle, patient, and understanding. It was a side of him she wasn't sure she knew how to handle. Lena sat by the window in her room, looking out at the moonlit sky. The palace was still, the night peaceful and quiet. But in her heart, a storm was brewing. She wasn't sure where this journey with David would take her, but she knew it was one she couldn't walk away from. The connection between them, however unspoken, was undeniable. There was something there, something more than just the bond of the ceremony. Something deeper. She had always thought that the mating ceremony would be a simple formality, a ritual she would endure because it was expected of her. But now, after everything that had happened, Lena wasn't so sure. Was there more to this bond than she had ever realized? She glanced at the door, wondering if David would come to check on her. It had been his idea to let her rest, to give her time to think. And yet, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to their connection than just the ceremony. She wanted to understand it. She needed to. Just as she was lost in thought, there was a knock at the door. Her heart skipped a beat, and before she could even call out, the door creaked open. David stood there, silhouetted by the light from the hallway. His gaze met hers, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. There was no need for words. They both knew what had brought him here. Slowly, David stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I didn't mean to disturb you," he said, his voice soft but steady. "I just wanted to see how you were doing." Lena stood up from the window, her heart racing at the sight of him. He was every bit the Alpha King, yet there was something about him now that made him seem more human, more approachable. "I'm fine," she replied, her voice surprisingly calm despite the flutter in her chest. "I've been thinking a lot. About everything." David nodded, taking a few steps closer to her. "I understand. You don't have to have all the answers right now. I just wanted to be here, to make sure you're okay." His words were simple, yet they carried a weight that made Lena feel safe. For the first time in her life, she wasn't being told what to do, what to feel. She wasn't being pushed into something she wasn't ready for. David was offering her time, space, and a choice, and that was more than she had ever expected. "I'm not sure what comes next," Lena admitted, her voice quieter now. "But I do know that I want to figure it out. With you, if you'll let me." David's eyes softened as he looked at her. "You have nothing to prove, Lena. Whatever you decide, I'll be here. We'll figure it out together." His words sent a wave of warmth through her, and for the first time, Lena felt a sense of certainty. She wasn't alone in this anymore. She had someone she could trust, someone who saw her for who she truly was, not just as an omega or a pawn in a royal tradition. She was Lena, and that was enough. As they stood there in the quiet of the night, Lena realized that this journey, whatever it was just beginning. And though she didn't know what the future held, she was no longer afraid of it. She would face it with David by her side. In the days that followed, Lena found herself unable to shake the thought of David. Though she had given herself time to think, the pull between them was undeniable. Every conversation, every glance they shared, only made it clearer there was something between them, something neither could ignore. But Lena knew that she couldn't rush into anything. She had never been the type to make decisions quickly, and this was far too important to make impulsively. One afternoon, as Lena walked through the palace gardens, she found herself thinking about everything. The flowers around her were in full bloom, their colors bright under the afternoon sun. The scent of fresh blooms filled the air, and for the first time in days, she allowed herself to relax. The peacefulness of the garden seemed to reflect how she was beginning to feel, calmer, more in control. She had been so focused on what was expected of her for so long that she had never stopped to ask herself what she truly wanted. Now, she had that choice. It was overwhelming at times, but it was also liberating. As Lena wandered deeper into the garden, she didn't notice David approaching until he was almost by her side. He had been giving her the space she needed, allowing her to take things at her own pace, but he was always nearby when she needed him. "I didn't mean to startle you," he said, his voice soft, as he appeared from behind a row of tall hedges. "I was just walking by and saw you out here." Lena smiled at him, her heart skipping a beat. His presence, though often commanding, was comforting now. She had come to appreciate his quiet strength, his ability to make her feel safe without saying much at all. "You didn't startle me," she replied, turning to face him fully. "I was just thinking." David nodded, understanding. "About everything?" he asked gently. Lena hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. "Yes. About what comes next, about what I want. I've never really had the chance to think about it before." "And now you do," David said, his voice low but filled with a quiet confidence. "And that's all that matters." Lena took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. They weren't just comforting, they were the reassurance she needed. David had never pressured her. He had never told her what to do or how to feel. He had only given her the space to figure it out on her own. "I've been thinking about what you said," Lena continued, her voice more certain now, "about taking things at my own pace. And I think I'm starting to understand what that means. I don't have to rush into anything. I don't have to follow anyone else's expectations." David smiled, and for a moment, Lena saw something softer in his eyes, something that went beyond his usual stoic nature. "You never did have to follow anyone else's expectations, Lena. That was just something you were taught to believe." His words resonated with her. For so long, she had believed that her life was mapped out for her, that her path was decided. But now, standing in the garden with David, she realized that wasn't true. The future was hers to decide. "I've been so focused on doing what I'm supposed to do," Lena said quietly. "I've forgotten what it feels like to choose for myself." "Now you're learning," David replied, his voice steady, offering her another smile. "And I'll be here, no matter what you decide. If you choose me, if you choose this bond, it's your choice, Lena. And I will support you." Lena's heart skipped a beat at his words. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in her life, she felt ready to face it. With David by her side, she didn't feel as though she was walking into the unknown alone. There was still so much to figure out, so much to understand about herself, about him, and about their connection. But in this moment, Lena knew one thing for sure. She wasn't afraid anymore. She would make her choices, and she would do it for herself. And whatever came next, she would face it with the same quiet strength David had shown her all along. It had been a few weeks since Lena had made the decision to take things at her own pace, and as the days passed, she found herself more and more comfortable with the choices she was making. She had never known such peace, a sense of control over her own destiny. The connection between her and David remained strong, but it was growing into something deeper, something that both surprised and comforted her. They spent more time together, in the palace and outside, in the quiet corners of the gardens or the distant courtyards, where they could talk without the prying eyes of the court. Their conversations ranged from light-hearted banter to serious discussions about what the future might hold. Lena had always thought she would be bound by the expectations of others, her role as an Omega, her place in the royal court. But now, she realized that she was more than just that. She was Lena, a person with her own desires, her own path to follow. One afternoon, as they walked together near the palace's grand fountain, David turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "You've come a long way," he said quietly, his voice low but full of admiration. "When we first met, I could see the weight of the world on your shoulders. But now, I see something different. You've found your voice." Lena smiled at his words, her heart swelling with warmth. "I couldn't have done it without you," she replied softly. "You gave me the space to find it. You didn't push me or try to control me. You let me decide what I wanted." David nodded, his eyes meeting hers with a quiet intensity. "You're strong, Lena. You've always had it in you. I'm just glad you're seeing that for yourself now." They stopped by the fountain, and Lena took a deep breath, feeling the cool breeze against her skin. It was moments like this, when it was just the two of them, that made her feel truly at ease. She had spent so many years trying to fit into the mold others had made for her, but now, she was finally free to be herself. "I'm still not sure what comes next," Lena admitted, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "But for the first time, I don't feel afraid of it." David reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face, his touch light but comforting. "You don't have to have all the answers, Lena. The future is never certain. But as long as we face it together, that's enough." His words resonated with her, and in that moment, Lena realized that she wasn't alone. She had a partner in David, someone who would walk with her through whatever came next. The weight of her past fears seemed to fade, replaced by a sense of hope and possibility. I think I'm ready," Lena said, her voice more confident now. "I'm ready to face whatever comes, with you by my side." David smiled, a soft, approving smile that made Lena's heart flutter. "I'll be right here," he said. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." And in that moment, Lena knew that whatever the future held, whatever trials or challenges awaited them, they would face it as equals. She wasn't just the Omega anymore. She was a woman who had found her strength, her voice, and the courage to shape her own destiny. With David by her side, she knew she could face anything. The future, uncertain as it was, suddenly felt full of possibilities. And for the first time in her life, Lena felt ready to embrace it all. It had been several weeks since Lena had come to terms with her own decisions, and the feeling of independence was beginning to settle in her heart. Each day, she was learning more about herself, about the world around her, and about the bond she shared with David. She had never imagined that things would change so quickly, but they had. The quiet moments they shared, the long walks through the palace grounds, the conversations about hopes and fears, had slowly forged a connection that felt undeniable. But even with all the growth she had experienced, there were still moments of doubt. The weight of responsibility and the future that lay ahead were never far from her thoughts. Despite David's reassurances, Lena couldn't ignore the pressure that came with being in his world, a world that had its own set of expectations. One evening, as dusk settled over the palace and the last light of day faded into twilight, Lena found herself standing at the edge of the palace garden, looking out at the horizon. The sky was painted with shades of purple and gold, and for a moment, she allowed herself to simply take in the beauty around her. The sound of footsteps behind her interrupted her thoughts, and when she turned, she saw David approaching. His presence was as calming as ever, his steps purposeful yet quiet. "I thought I might find you out here," he said, his voice low, the sound of it almost blending with the evening breeze. Lena smiled softly, though there was still a hint of worry in her eyes. "It's peaceful here," she said quietly. "I like to come here when I need to think." David nodded, his gaze following hers toward the horizon. He stood beside her, offering her the space to speak, as he always did. "What's on your mind?" he asked. After a moment of silence, Lena hesitated for a moment, the words she had been holding back bubbling to the surface. "I'm just wondering about the future," she said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "About us. About what happens after everything changes. After the ceremony, after all the expectations." She turned to look at him, her expression searching, as if trying to find the answers she wasn't sure how to ask. David met her gaze, his eyes steady, unwavering. "I can't promise that everything will be easy, Lena," he said quietly. "But I can promise you that you don't have to face it alone. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." His words were simple, yet they carried a depth that reassured her in a way she hadn't expected. He wasn't offering her false hope or empty promises. He was offering her his loyalty, his commitment to standing by her side through whatever challenges lay ahead. Lena let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, and the knot in her chest loosened slightly. "I'm just scared, David," she admitted softly, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm scared of failing, of not being enough." David's gaze softened, and he took a step closer to her, closing the distance between them. "You are enough, Lena," he said, his voice gentle yet firm. "You always have been. Don't let anyone, including yourself, tell you otherwise." The sincerity in his voice made her heart swell with emotion, and for the first time, Lena allowed herself to believe it. She wasn't just the Omega she had always been. She was capable. She was strong, and she had the right to choose her own path. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling with gratitude. "Thank you for being here, for understanding." David smiled, a soft, reassuring smile that made her feel as if everything was going to be okay. "I'm not going anywhere, Lena. Not now, not ever. Whatever happens, I'll be right here with you." As they stood together in the quiet of the garden, Lena felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of it. With David by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next. The weight of the world felt a little lighter, and her heart a little braver. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And that thought, more than anything, gave her the courage to move forward. It had been months since that evening in the garden, and Lena had come to realize just how much had changed in such a short time. The fear that had once held her back had slowly melted away, replaced by a growing sense of strength and certainty. With David by her side, she had learned to trust not only him, but also herself. She wasn't just an Omega anymore. She was a woman, a person with choices, with a future of her own making. The palace had become less of a cage and more of a place where she could begin to understand her own potential. The expectations that once felt suffocating were now just challenges she could face. But even as Lena grew more confident, there were moments when doubts crept in. She would find herself standing in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection, wondering if she truly deserved the path that lay ahead. She had always been told what to do, who to be, and now that she had the freedom to choose, she sometimes wondered if she was making the right choices. It was on one of these days, when the weight of uncertainty pressed on her once more, that David came to her, as he always did. He had noticed the change in her, the quiet moments where her mind would wander, lost in thought. He understood better than anyone that the path to self-discovery wasn't always easy. "Lena," David said softly, finding her by the large window overlooking the courtyard. The setting sun bathed the room in golden light, and she turned to face him, offering a small smile. "You've been quiet," he observed gently. "What's on your mind?" Lena sighed, turning back to the window, her fingers tracing the edge of the glass. "I'm just thinking," she said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "I sometimes wonder if I'm ready for everything that's coming. I've never had to make decisions like this before. I don't know if I'm strong enough to carry this weight." David walked over to her, standing just behind her, his presence a steady reminder that she was never alone. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch warm and reassuring. "You don't have to carry it all by yourself, Lena," he said quietly. "You have me. We have each other." The simple truth of his words struck her, and for the first time in a long while, Lena felt the weight of her fears lessen. She wasn't alone in this. She didn't have to face the future, with all its uncertainty, by herself. David's presence had been a constant in her life, and it was more than just a comforting thought. It was a reality she could rely on. "I'm still afraid sometimes," Lena admitted, turning to look at him. "Afraid that I'll fail, that I'll let you down or let myself down." David's eyes softened as he looked at her, and he gently cupped her chin, lifting her gaze to meet his. "You are not a failure, Lena," he said firmly, his voice full of conviction. "You have already shown more courage than anyone could have expected, and you will continue to show that courage, not just for others, but for yourself." Lena felt the truth of his words settle deep within her. For so long, she had defined herself by the roles others had placed on her. She had been the quiet Omega, the one who followed the rules, the one who bent to the expectations of the world around her. But that wasn't who she was anymore. She was a person with the right to choose her path, to carve out a future that was entirely her own. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I'd do without you." David smiled, his eyes filled with warmth and understanding. "You won't have to find out, Lena. I'm not going anywhere." The assurance in his voice made her heart swell, and for the first time, Lena knew without a doubt that she was not only capable of facing the challenges ahead, but she was also deserving of the future she was creating. Together, they would face whatever came next. And for the first time in her life, Lena felt truly ready.